Hey everybody, and welcome to Make It Happen Mondays. This is John Barrows of Jay Barrows Consulting. Appreciate y'all joining me here today. It's a fantastic day here in Boston. Weather's about 75 degrees. Spring is here. Opened up the backyard yesterday, which was awesome. Yeah, and just in an overall good mood. So just wanted to kind of make sure that we're moving in the right direction here. Last week had a awesome. Hold on a second. Let me just make sure I'm casting here. Are we on? Just want to make sure that, yeah, I'm sorry. Last week we had an awesome session with Morgan, and hopefully you joined in on that one. That kid's doing some very cool things, and hopefully him and I are going to be doing some more things together here, moving up here soon. So keep an eye on that. But today's Make It Happen Monday is going to be about just stop doing what you're supposed to do. That's the theme of this. I wanted to chime in on this because I get a lot of reps asking me about, hey, John, what should I do about that? What should I do about this? And they're getting directions from their managers. They're getting direction from their careers or whatever. And so I wanted to chime in a little bit on this, a few learning lessons that I've had in my career, in my life, and just share a couple of stories, and then obviously open it up for questions. There's a few questions that you guys asked based on the last session, so I'll address those, and then obviously chime in anytime here and ask questions. I'll jump into them. So the whole theme of stop doing what you're supposed to do hit me in two ways, or two stories, one personal and one professional. And really it was about, as I went through my career and went through my life, I was kind of going through the motions and just doing what I thought I was supposed to do. So as an example, the first one was more of a personal one where, I'd say my freshman year in college, I ended up meeting this girl and just sticking with her for 7 years, and then moving back up to Boston, moved her to Boston. And I knew the relationship wasn't right, but I was supposed to, I was doing what I was supposed to do. Like, after you're with somebody for 7 years, what do, right? You get engaged, then you get married, then you get a house, and then you buy a car and a house, and then you have a kid, right? All that stuff that you're supposed to do. Even though I knew it was wrong, I was going through that because I didn't really think any other way. Now, thankfully, she's the one who actually broke it off on us. I was heartbroken, but I'd say about 2 days after that, it felt like the weight of the world lifted off my shoulders. And then I went out there and was able to find my wife now, who I am absolutely in love with, and now have the actual family and lifestyle that I want when it's right. Right. So that was one on the personal side of just being woken up, even though I knew it was wrong. Somebody else had to make that decision for me, and I don't want that to happen again in my personal life. On the professional side, it was when I started my first company, or, joined a company that my buddy started. And when we got through and, 7 years startup, grinded, doing everything I was supposed to do, or at least working my ass off and trying to. And then we got acquired by Staples. And, I was just going through and I had my head down. I was grinding. I was doing everything that again, I thought I was supposed to do based on what they were telling me. And again, I knew it was wrong. Something was wrong that didn't feel right to me. And I didn't have the confidence, or I guess the knowledge, to speak up and say anything about it. So eventually they fired me. Again, they made the decision for me. And again, at first I was like, oh, what am I supposed to do here? Like, this is what I bled this company for 7 years. I had no plan B. I didn't even think about anything else. And now all of a sudden I woke up and I had to find a job. Now, for me, thankfully, there was a transition period there where they gave me, severance and a few other things. But, I woke up again, maybe this time it maybe took a week. But when I woke up a week later, and again, it was like the weight of the world was lifted off my shoulders, and I was out to go, spread my wings and go do what I wanted to do, not what I was supposed to do. Right. And a learning lesson from that one too, this actually ties into some of the closing techniques that I talk about in my trainings. I train on negotiation, objection, and closing, as well as prospecting. And one of the closing techniques is called it's called the walk away. Actually, I'm sorry, it's called the doorknob close, or the Columbo close, which is effectively after you've lost a deal, you go back to the client and say, hey, what was the real reason that I lost that deal? And the reason you do that is to learn. Now, the sleazy sales way of applying that is once they tell you, you jump right back into it and say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize, we can do that, right? I think that's the douchey sales rep way of doing that. But I usually do that approach trying to learn for my own personal and professional development. And I do this with lost deals as well. So for instance, when I lose a deal that I really thought that I was going to win, I'll go back to the client and I'll say, hey, you know what, just for my own personal professional development here, could you help me understand what really happened? And I'd say probably 1 out of 5 will give me some insights there that are better than the deal I would have won anyways, right? Because I'll learn and apply that moving forward. And I used that when I got fired from Staples. So this guy Jay Baitler, quick story on this one. When they were acquiring us, so Ron Sargent is the guy who ran all of Worldwide Staples. Jay Baitler was the guy who ran the $12 billion part of their organization, the contract side, which purchased us. And when they were going through the interviews, before the acquisition, they had to meet with all the management team. And we were super young. I'd say we were 27, 28 years old, something like that. So we had a consultant come in and talk to us about the process and what was going to happen. And he gave us some tips on what they probably were going to ask and what we should probably say. And so, for me, a lot of it didn't feel right, but everybody was like, John, please just follow the script, man. Just do what you're supposed to do here. Don't fuck this up, because they know I'm pretty unfiltered and I might have said something that screwed the whole deal up. And I wasn't a majority shareholder. So I was like, all right, I'll kind of do what I'm told here. And so then Jay interviewed us one by one. And I sat there and he interviewed. And so what do you think about the acquisition? And I was about as fake as it could get, and I'm pretty bad at being fake. I'm a terrible liar because I'm just about as transparent as it gets. So I was like, oh, this is going to be fantastic. I'm super excited. And even though I had a ton of concerns about the whole culture and selling value and all these different things, but I played my role, right? So then fast forward, Jay met with my CEO, and my CEO was like, so what'd you think of the management team? He's like, oh, you got a great management team. Everybody's really solid. There's one person I have a little bit of concern about, and it's John. And my CEO was floored. He was like, what? He's like, out of anybody I thought you would have had would have loved, it would have been John. He's our culture. I'm the one who stood up at the beginning of every month and gave the rah-rah speech. I read a raving fan culture and everything, right? I was like the 5th person on board. So he was like, wow. And Jay was like, yeah. And so Jim, my CEO, defended me and said, no, he's the right guy, whatever. But that started a negative perception from Jay of me from the start, even though I didn't even really know it. And then they acquired us and we were going through it. And the whole time I was just like, man, something's off about me and Jay. I just want to go grab a beer with this guy, because I think I felt like that meeting wasn't right, and I felt like he had a bad perception of me. And I felt like if I had just grabbed a beer with this guy, we'd be able to see more, more eye to eye. But Jim always was protecting me, what he thought was protecting me. He was like, no, John, let me deal with that. You go just execute and we'll take care of it. Because he was afraid, again, that I would go talk to Jay, say something stupid, or, again, not have my filter on and get fired. And so, I went through that whole for about 6 months, almost a year into this. And eventually, they ended up firing me. And after I came to grips with it, and after I was done, I ended up reaching back out to Jay, doing again the doorknob / Columbo close, and said, hey Jay, now that we're done, I'm not groveling for my job back here or anything like that. Would you be open to just a 1-hour meeting where I can just talk to you for my own personal and professional development and see what really happens. And he was more than accommodating. He came back to me. He was like, absolutely, John, come on in here, schedule some time with my assistant and go, right? So I scheduled time. I actually prepared for the meeting. I came up with 10 questions for him based on, again, very thoughtful things that I just wanted to learn about myself. We sat there, and when I tell you that was the best hour in business I've ever spent, I'm not exaggerating. First of all, he came, he was like, John Barrows, get in here. He's like, he's like, I am so impressed with your, just the fact that you reached out to me looking for this feedback. He's like, one of my favorite things to do is mentor leaders and organizations and that type of stuff. So the hour's yours, my friend. You ask me whatever you want to ask. And I said, look, Jay, I got 10 questions here. You could be as open and honest as you want to be. You don't have to answer some of them if you don't want. But I'd really appreciate your insights. And he said, okay, cool. I'll answer them all. And he answered every single one of them. And one of the questions I asked him was, hey, Jay, would you have been open to a meeting like this, where it was open dialogue, whatever, when I was at Thrive? And he goes, well, yeah, of course I would have. Why wouldn't I have? I said, well, Jay, I was under the impression, or at least I was told that, I really couldn't talk to you really open and frank because there's a risk there, and you might have fired me. And then that would have, upset my team and the whole company and all this other stuff. So that's why I was kind of on the impression that I wasn't really allowed to talk to you. And he said something to me, which has stuck to me to this day. And he said, John, what's the risk? What's the risk? I was like, well, what do you mean? I would get fired and my company, and I'd let down the people that I was working with and everything else. He said, okay, well, let me ask you this. He goes, say you came to me, say you went over your CEO's head, you came to me, you had this conversation, and I absolutely shredded you and I ratted you out to your CEO and all that other stuff. And I was really pissed off at it. He's like, would you have wanted to work for me? I was like, well, no, absolutely not. He's like, so you would have figured out a lot earlier that you didn't want to work for me, right? And you probably would have made better plans. I'm like, yeah, that's probably. He's like, so you wouldn't have gone through that year of pain that you just went through, would you have? I'm like, well, no. He goes, okay, other approach. Say you come to me and we have a really good conversation just like this. And he's like, do you think we would have probably had a much better working relationship and you would have enjoyed your time here at Staples a lot more? I'm like, well, yeah, obviously. He goes, then I'm going to ask you again, what was the risk? And that stuck with me to this day. It's like, what's the risk, right? I think, one of my guiding principles, if you go back on them, you can Google them. They're on my LinkedIn page, 12 guiding principles to success in life, business, and sales. One of them is, it used to be always have a plan B. I disagree with that. I don't think you need a plan B. What I think you need to be is totally cool with the worst case scenario. Right? You got to be absolute, like whenever you make a decision about something, this is kind of how I guide my life these days, is whenever I make a decision to invest in something, to do something, whatever it is, I ask myself, okay, what's the absolute worst case scenario on this one, right? Well, the absolute worst case scenario is whatever, as long as I'm okay with that, then I go ahead and I make that decision. And that's what I learned from Jay and also from my former fiance is, again, stop going through the motions, stop doing what you're supposed to do, take that risk. As long as it's for the right reasons, you should be able to hold your head up high and as long as you're okay with the worst case scenario. And I say this to a lot of you who are out there asking me questions about, John, what do I do with my life, my business, my career, my job? I'm frustrated, whatever it is. I think a lot of it has to do with sitting down and saying, okay, what do I want to do? What's the right thing to do? I got to do what I'm supposed to do for a little while to make sure that I'm crossing those T's and dotting those I's. But once I do that, and it's still not working or it still doesn't feel right, like what's the next thing? What else could I be doing here to change things up a little bit? And so I want you to walk away with, a lot of people say, okay, make $50 a day. I think we're in a tough spot right now with sales, especially inside sales, because I think we're in this middle ground of being told, hey, we got to do quality and account-based sales and account-based marketing and all that other stuff. And you got to be hyper-focused and send customized emails, but yet we still got to make $50 a day. We still got to make $100 a day or whatever it is. So I think a lot of sales reps are in this middle ground of, well, okay, I get that. I want to do really quality stuff, but I'm being told I have to hit my KPIs. And if I don't do this, I'm going to get dinged. So here's an example, stop doing what you're supposed to do. Do that for a week, right? Hit those numbers and then track every little component of it, right? How many calls did you make? How many emails did you send out? How many responses did you get? That type of thing. And then spend a week not doing that. Spend a week being hyper-focused, doing homework, writing thoughtful emails, coming up with contact strategies that are tailored to the people that you're reaching out to, right? Those type of things. And compare the results. If the results are better than like say the thoughtful, your conversion ratio is a lot higher here. So say you sent out 50 emails, right, for instance, a day. So say 250 in that week, and you got 10 meetings, or let's call it 5 meetings, because that's probably more realistic. Okay. So you got 5 meetings, but then you spent a week sending 50 very thoughtful, 50 total, and you got 5 meetings, right? You could bring that back to your boss and say, hey, boss, I've been looking at, I totally appreciate, I'm trying to hit these KPIs that you're asking. This week, though, I spent some time doing a little bit of a different approach here, and look at the results. What do you want me to do? Right? Any manager that's worth their salt is going to say, hey, if you can show me results using your approach and it's a better approach, then keep doing that, right? Any manager worth their salt. If they're not, that's where you start kind of looking around and saying, okay, am I really at the right place? Am I really with the right manager? Okay. So put the premise of if I'm doing the right things for the right reasons, for the benefit of myself, but also the benefit of my company that I'm working for and the benefit of the customers, do what's the right thing to do, not what you're supposed to do. Do what you think is the right thing to do and try to justify it for the right reasons. All right. And just stop going through the motions. I think that's the one thing that I keep trying to work with kids on. And when I'm doing training is just, a lot of us are just going through the motions. We're showing up every day and we're making our dials, we're sending our emails or whatever it is. And and it's, first of all, that's a boring ass career, man. That's a boring ass job. That's a boring ass thing. And you get burnt out real fast. So, but if you put some thought into it, if you think every day, what do I want to learn today? What do I want to figure out today? That's where it starts to become real interesting. And that's why you hear me talk a lot about, in the past about split testing everything you do. You know what I mean? Come in and say, what do I want to figure out today? What's the challenge I'm having? And let me come up with 2 different approaches to that and try it 10 times this way, 10 times that way, see which yields a better response. You start doing that every day, you start getting better so much faster, and you start learning things so much more efficiently. All right. And then you have an equation that you can apply as you become manager and all that other stuff. So just stop doing what you're supposed to do. I mean, do what you're supposed to do, but when it feels wrong or it doesn't feel right or you keep going through the motions, try something different. And try to break out of that mold of kind of going through the process of, okay, I got to do 2 years doing this and 2 years doing that and 2 years doing this and, or I have to go through this and then I have to be big business. I mean, try a startup, do something different, be a consultant. Why not? Especially if you're in your 20s, try fucking everything out. I kind of follow the Gary V train of thought here. In your 20s, literally try every fucking thing you could possibly imagine, make as many mistakes as you can because you don't have any responsibilities. You usually don't have any responsibilities. You can still go, sleep on your buddy's couch if you want to, if you screw things up. So in your 30s, just really start to solidify where you want to be. And then in your 40s, if you haven't figured it out by then, you're kind of screwed. So anyways, I just want to point that out. It's been on my mind because a lot of you have been asking me questions about, John, what about this? My boss hasn't asked me to do that. And my company is doing this and whatever it is. Just be okay with worst case scenario, do it for the right reasons, and stop just doing what you think you're supposed to do, both personally and professionally. I promise you. The day that somebody else makes that decision for you and you realize that it was the right decision. So again, they break up in a relationship or they fire you from a job when you knew it wasn't right, but they made the decision for you. They're going to make the decision eventually. If it doesn't feel right, they're going to make that decision for you anyways. But the day you wake up when that happens to you and you realize, shit, you know what? That was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. You're going to understand what I'm talking about here. So anyways, I'm going to flip this back over to questions. I know Ali had a question here. While you're in the field, what was your biggest, most rewarding deal you ever closed? Can you speak to how you get it done? Yeah, so this one, I have a few of them. I think a more recent one was I got Salesforce locked into a 2-year commit on my online portal, which was great. That took a lot of digging and clawing and negotiating with both procurement and leveraging my champion. I think one of the big things about procurement and getting deals done is, and what I've really started to understand a lot more is how important champions are in your deals. And when I say champion, there's a lot of people talk about champions and I don't think they really define them really well enough. A champion isn't somebody that's just willing to talk to you or you have a good conversation with. A champion is somebody, my characteristics of champions, two characteristics here. One is they can steal budget. They don't have to be the budget holder. They don't have to be the person that says, yes, I am the budget, who's signing off on this budget, but they can steal it. They can go in and take it if they need to. So they're effectively, they're sitting in the room when the decision's made. And they can say, no, we need to go here as opposed to here. The other is they agree to be your champion. You actually have that conversation with them where you could say, hey, you're going to be my champion, or are you going to help me make this deal happen, that type of thing. Because my experience, there's really only two reasons, two answers to that question. One is, yes, John, absolutely, we're going to work together to make this happen. The other is anything other than that. Like if you hesitate when I say, hey, you're going to help me work, make this happen, whatever, and they hesitate, they're not your champion. You got to figure out something else to do there to get them to be your champion. All right. So I had a champion at Salesforce, and I've been working together with him, knew the value of what was going on, mapped out this whole plan, and then we had to restructure. We kind of had to look at things and say, okay, now we got to do an open license agreement for my portal and all this other stuff. And I wanted at least a 2-year commit here because we were doing an open license, which meant that everybody could take my training in a week, and if they wanted to cancel the contract, they could. And what am I going to do against Salesforce, right? So worked a while with this guy, got him, built him as my champion. And then when procurement came up, he was the one who made that happen on the back end for me. And he actually even sent me an email saying, hey, you're welcome. I was like, thank you very much. The one that I would say where I was really in the field, and this was back at Thrive Networks, and this is all about patience. You know, our average deal size when I was selling at Thrive, we sold outsourced IT services, and it was our average deal size was about $3,500 a month. That's what you had to spend with us on a monthly basis for us to manage your infrastructure. So servers, workstations, backup, security, and this was before cloud was sexy and whatever. There was this one account. It was a pharmaceutical company here in Boston. And I came across and they were using one of our biggest competitors and spending a whole boatload of money with this company. And so I met their main decision maker guy. And he was like, you know, I ended up, I forget how I got in there, to tell you the truth. I really don't remember. I think it was either, you know, typical cold calling or whatever. And I got in front of this guy and he was open to the conversation. And I went in and met with him. And I told him what we had to offer. He's like, this is all great, John. I really appreciate it. But we're working with XYZ company. And, you know, I'm totally cool with where they are right now. But what he said to me was, he goes, look, I just want to let you know, I'm a 3 strikes and you're out type of guy. Okay. He's like, as a vendor, he's like, you screw up once, no problem. Well, everybody screws up once, right? You screw up twice, you're on notice. He's like, but then you screw up 3 times. It's not even a conversation. It's, I'm moving on to another vendor. He goes, so John, just stay in touch with me. And just realize that one day you might get a call from me and saying, hey, you're up, batter up type of thing. I was like, all right, great. I was like, how could I stay in touch with you? And this is, I asked him, and this is something that you could ask your clients too, as a little nugget to walk away from this with is hey, what's the best way to communicate with you moving forward here? And how do I stay in touch with you without being annoying? Right? Because a lot of people just, you know, the whole, you know, my feelings on touch base and check in and that type of shit. And he was like, well, you know, he was like, if you ever come across this type of information, or if something ever changes on your end, or you're coming out with a new service or something like that, you know, just feel free to share that stuff with me and whatever. So, okay, cool. So now I was at Thrive for 7 years. Okay. I ended up, this deal took 3 years to make happen, but all 3, they were always on my list. I put them on my whiteboard as that big white whale that I wanted. Right. And I put him and I followed him and I would share information every once in a while, not ridiculous. I would, you know, check in without touching base or checking in, sharing some new insights, giving him some updated information on our company, like he had asked for, those type of things. And I remember vividly, I was walking down, I was on Boylston Street in Boston, walking down after a meeting with another client, and he calls me up. He goes, hey, John, strike 3, you're up. And I was like, what? And it was 3 years later, by the way. He's like, yep, you're up. And I was like, shit. He's like, when can you meet? I'm like, I can meet right now if you want me to. So I remember going over to his office, meeting up with him. He's like, all right, map this out. And it ended up being $50,000 a month. Well, it started at $25,000 a month, and then it very quickly increased to 50 G's a month. And it was by far the biggest deal that we had ever brought into our company. And I think that one had a lot to do with, you know, takeaways there is patience, not being annoying, making sure that you're staying on top of it, asking what the client wants and staying in touch with them, but never pushing too hard. And that's why you'll always hear me say, you know, the biggest solution to every other problem at every other stage of the sales process, you know, negotiations, discounting, all that stuff. The biggest solution to all of it is a big fat pipeline. You know, when you have a big fat pipeline, you can be patient like that. You don't have to push. So I know a lot of us out there are being, you know, transitioning territories every year or so. So it's really hard to kind of take that long-term view there. But I will say for me, one of my other guiding principles that I talk about is I live my life by the rule of what goes around comes around. Right? The more you put into it, and you might not get that huge deal that you've been thinking about, but another one will probably come in when you move territories, when you move roles or anything like that. So those are my 2 favorite deals. You know, one more recent that really had to do with a champion. Another one that was a lot more, you know, earlier in my career, but was really based on patience and profiling that account and staying in touch with them in a very thoughtful way without being annoying. So thanks for the question, Ali. Connor, you got a question here. Outsourced IT sales. What worked most when you were meeting with customers and they were happy with their current MSP? Yeah, that one's a tough one, man. I mean, the whole, hey, devil I know is better than devil I know. I don't. I think this, again, has a lot to do with bringing new ideas to the table for them. A lot of what I found is a lot of IT sales, MSPs specifically, would get pretty lazy with helping their clients think differently. And if you pay attention to some of my Facebook Live stuff and some of the content that I put out there, I really do believe that, back in my day, Connor, when this was 15 years ago when I was selling IT services, it was kind of the approach that we were taking, which was proactive outsourced IT support, was actually kind of new. I mean, up until that point, most IT services were very project oriented. It's like, hey, buy a block of hours or something like that. And we turned it into, hey, monthly maintenance. You pay us X amount of dollars a month. We'll maintain your systems so they don't blow up, so you don't have to do projects, right? So that was kind of new. So it was a new approach, which got a lot of people thinking, right? Now, there's a million solutions out there, and, any solution's about a Google search away. So it's not really about I don't think it's about like like how awesome you guys are, because a lot of things, Apple's, I mean, maybe there's some differences with the tools you use or your approach or something like that. I think it's about bringing the new ideas to the table and say, hey, have you thought about this? And what about that? And here's some different things here. And this is where I think we can differentiate ourselves. And I'll give you a quick story on this one as it relates to financial advisors and stuff like that. I had a guy about 12 years ago I've been working with at this point, who has been selling me my life insurance. Okay. So a while ago I said, what's important, life insurance, just in case, whatever. I get in touch with this kid, and he's about my age. And so over the years, early on in my 20s, he belonged to one of the golf courses here in Massachusetts that I didn't have the money for back then. And he would take me out every single year to, hey, John, let's go hit the links. Early on, I was happy to, right? And what we would do is we talk about how much money I was making, then we'd hack around for, whatever, 3-4 hours. And then he'd ask me for referrals and I'd say no. And that happened year over year over year. And then I had my daughter. All right. And when I had my daughter, things changed obviously very drastically. And I was very goal oriented now. And I started to look about, not just my future, but her future and my wife's future as well. But now time became the value to me. Right. And so eventually he called me up again, a couple of years into that. He said, hey, John, you want to go hit the links this year? And I'm like, why? He's like, I don't know, touch base, check in, see how you're doing, man. I'm like, can I ask you, is this pretty much how the day's going to work? Is that you and I are going to catch up for the first 15, 20 minutes? I'm going to tell you how much money I'm making, tell you, you're going to tell me how much more life insurance I need to buy. And then we're going to go hack around for about 3.5, 4 hours. And then you ask for referrals. I'm going to tell you I don't have any. Is that pretty much how the day's going to go? And he's like, well, yeah, I guess. I was like, let me ask you, are you more important than my daughter? The answer to that one's no. Right. And so, my point to him was like, look, no longer is this golfing thing. And this aligns with Challenger Sale, by the way, if you guys are paying attention to that. Challenger Sale talks about how the relationship sale is dying. I don't think the relationship sale is dying. I think the relationship sale has just changed drastically. Instead of, going out to dinner, golf and that type of crap, now it's about adding value. That's how you develop relationships. So after that conversation with him, what he started doing was every year he started sharing with me these things and ideas about what I could be doing with my money and stuff that he couldn't even do. Okay. Because all he did was life insurance at the time. Then fast forward a little bit. Now I have a financial advisor that has all my money, right? And my mutual funds, my 401k and all these different things. And so, but every year here was, okay, let's review every year at the end of the year. How much, what are we doing? And really, ultimately, all that conversation ended up being was, hey, have we made money or have we lost money this year? That's pretty much all it ended up being. And so eventually this kid was adding so much value, and this year was a yearly thing. And, again, don't get me wrong, I was getting value out of this relationship, but I was getting more value out of this one. And so eventually this kid moved into a position to a new company where he could do all the financial service stuff. And I said, you know what? I ended up taking my retirement assets from this company and putting it over here because he added value, and he got me to think. And so that's my point to you, Connor, here is those questions, those things that other MSPs, hey, we're happy with them. Talk about where they're going in the future. Talk about new ideas, things that you're doing to help bring better ideas and stuff that they could maybe even go back to their existing providers with and say, hey, can we do this? Because the more you do that, the more people start to look at you differently. And our last story here is the same thing with LinkedIn. Think about LinkedIn. Their number one competitor is LinkedIn. And all these kids are like, well, how do we get these people to buy, and these the upgraded packages and everything like that. And I asked him, I said, look, instead of pushing on him every single time about, you got to buy this, you got to buy this, you got to buy this. Let me ask you, if you looked at my LinkedIn profile here, my LinkedIn website, would you be able to find 3 or 4 things that I could be doing right now that would improve my profile, my views, or whatever it is? And they're like, oh yeah, absolutely. All of the reps said that. I said, cool. Then tell me about those. Share those with me. Right? Hey, John, I was on your profile the other day and I noticed if you just did X, Y, and Z, you'd be able to boost your, exposure by this and attract a lot more things or whatever it is. And just share that information with me thoughtfully and eventually get me to look at you differently than just a sales rep. So kind of, that would be what I would tell you is first of all, get a big pipeline so you can do that. And then just ask them questions about what they're doing right now to make sure that, they're in a good spot, and share new ideas with them that they might not have thought about, of what things they could be doing or what strategies they could be putting in place. And again, ask them after that meeting, hey, it doesn't look like we're a good fit here. And be totally cool with that too, by the way. I walk into situations being like, hey, look, I'm trying to qualify you in as much as I'm trying to qualify you out. Like, we don't need bad customers. We don't need bad relationships here. So I want to make sure, what I'm trying to find out is if we can really move the dial for you. If we can't really move the dial for you, if we can get you that much better, then it's not worth making the switch just because of the aggravation. But if we can move the dial, if we can really make that difference, that's where I'm going to talk to you about this. So let me ask you a few questions here. And if it's pretty apparent that we can make a difference, I'll let you know. If it's not, I'll also let you know. And if it's not, I'm just going to say, hey, what's the best way to communicate with you moving forward here? What are some of the things I might be able to share with you that you're interested in right now, that you maybe could even bring back to your existing provider, and see what happens there? And then jot those things down, put them in your CRM, and then follow those things on social and share them when you can. All right. There's one more. I know we're a little bit over, but I'll go into this because Zohaib Ahmed talked about last time. He said about understanding the buying process of a customer. That one is, you got to understand. I mean, it's really understanding that the buying process is very fluid these days. Okay. It starts, it stops, it goes from this person to that person to this person. One of the best things that I've gone through in my training, and this is what I train on, is literally, it's the whole gives and gets thing, right? The gives are what people ask of you, and then the gets are the things that you want from them. The gives, that's their buying process effectively, so map out all the things that clients ask of you. They want information, they want discounts, they want proposals, they want, there's a procurement process in place there. They want trials, they want proof of concept, they want, multiple people, all those different things, and then map those out. Just brainstorm that and map those out early to late. What comes early on in the sales process, what comes late on in the sales process. Hopefully you've been through the sales process enough with enough of your clients where you can kind of understand all the pieces that are involved in that, and literally just brainstorm them out, and then start early, late, and then see if that marries up to the next time to say, okay, what's happening next? And see if they skip through that process. Because, for instance, references, a lot of people ask for references real early on. That's a sign that they don't really care. They're just filling your column fodder, or they're ready to make a decision, and that you're coming in really, really late in the sales process. So I would just map that out and do a simple little whiteboard session with your team about what are all the things that your clients ask of you, and then prioritize them early to late. And that'll give you a good sense. And then, make sure that you're asking the client along the way, not only, for instance, what's the buying process and who's involved, but also what's the procurement process, what's the legal process here, so we don't get kicked in the teeth when that happens. And then you start to kind of marry it up with your selling process and kind of see where they are. All right. But try to map that out. It makes it pretty easy when you actually make it objective. Okay. Anyways, thanks for your questions today. I really appreciate it. I know we're a little bit over time here, but keep asking questions. Keep hitting me up on Facebook, on Snapchat, John M as in Michael Barrows. I'm also doing some fun stuff, like I said, on Facebook Live, help spread the word here. And I'm continuing to try to share out as much content I possibly can. So keep on the lookout here in the near future, though. There's going to be some interesting things going on with Jay Barrows that we're going to have some fun with. So, and tonight, if you want to follow me on Snapchat, I'm going to the Dead Mouse concert, so that should be fun. Anyways, make it a great day, everybody. Have a great week. All right. And again, try to make somebody smile today. All right. Whether it's a prospect or somebody in the office or anything like that, try to spread some good vibes out there. There's too much negative shit going on these days, and this world, we all could use a little smile. All right, everybody, have a great one.